Greetings! I am Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue our talks about Pathfinder classes. So today we're going to bring in the last couple of classes. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the Rogue. The Rogue is a thief, a trickster, an acrobat, a diplomat, a spy. They take a lot of these roles that involve a lot of skill. So rogues tend to need dexterity and intelligence. Dexterity because they're moving around, they're sly, they're flipping around. Intelligence because they have those skills which they really rely on for a lot of their abilities. Now they get a D8, they get 8 plus intelligence modifier skill points. They're proficient in all simple weapons. They are also proficient in light armor. They have a 3/4 base attack bonus. I've talked about that before. They have good reflex as their good save. Now the big ability that rogues get is sneak attack. What is sneak attack? When I can catch someone off guard, which in game terms means they don't have their dex bonus. We talked about AC before, that there was something called flat-footed. When you're flat-footed, you don't have your dexterity modifier or any of the other dex-based sort of defensive abilities that add to AC. When this occurs, a rogue can sneak attack you. This occurs if you're surprised at the beginning of a combat, or let's say the rogue has been hiding as his friends are fighting you and he pops up from behind and stabs you, something like that, where you're caught off guard and don't expect it. So the other time a rogue can get sneak attack is when it's flanking. Then what is flanking? Flanking means in the physical world, I am on the exact opposite side of an enemy from my ally, and we're flanking him then. So let's say there's an enemy right here in front of me. If my ally comes up behind that enemy, I mean exactly behind it, like straight line, through the middle of the guy, he's behind it, then we're both flanking that. Now there are other times you can get flanking with special rules and stuff, but that's the general rule of flanking, which means if my rogue friend comes up behind this guy, he can get a sneak attack. Now we know when you can get a sneak attack. What is a sneak attack? Extra damage. It's an extra amount of damage that levels with you as a rogue, which it starts with 1d6 and keeps going up every other level up to 10d6 of extra damage whenever you hit someone when you get your sneak attack, which means if I catch someone off guard, I can do a lot of damage really quickly, or I can move up behind someone and as my big fighter friend's fighting him, I can stab him in the kidney to do a lot of extra damage quickly, like throw it in there. That's sort of the sneakiness of a rogue. It gets that in there. Now the other ability a rogue gets at first level is trap finding. Traps are a hazard. You have to remember, a lot of like ancient tombs and dungeons, you always imagine like the various traps, like crushing walls, dart traps, things like that, pit traps. A rogue gets the ability that when they're looking for a trap, they get a bonus equal to half their level, rounded up, and when trying to disable a trap, they get that same bonus. So they're good at spotting and disabling traps, hence trap finding. Okay. Next class to talk about is a Sorcerer. Sorcerers are arcane spellcasters, which get their spellcasting ability from their blood. They've got this like bloodline, which has enabled them to cast spells, from their ancestry. Like some kind of magical being was in their ancestry, and now, because of that, they can cast spells. Now they get a d6 hit dice. They are proficient with only simple weapons. They get 2 plus intelligence modifier skills. They get half base attack bonus, meaning every level they get it. They have good will saves, and that's it. Now, sorcerers have spells known. I've talked about that before with like bards, but they have also spells known. But they go up to 9th level spells. So at first level, you know a couple of 0 level spells and some first level spells, and then you have a number of slots to use per day to cast the first level spells. As you know, as I've mentioned before, 0 level spells, you can cast them at will. So they use their charisma for their spell casting, actually just like a bard. It's the only difference between them is the spell list. That's pretty much the only difference between them. Well, and a lot of their other abilities. But spell casting wise, sorcerers, bards both use charisma. They both have spells known. That's the big similarities. Anyway, what else does a sorcerer get? They have Execute material components as a bonus feat. Now, certain classes I've talked about bonus feats before. They're extra feats that you can get, F-E-A-T. I haven't talked about what a feat is really. Skill material component says any spell that has a material cost of 1 gold or less, I don't need. Now, what it means is when I'm casting a spell has certain requirements to cast. Traditionally, they are verbal, which would be represented with a V, or somatic, represented by hand motions and an S. So those are the two big ones that show up in most spells. There are a few exceptions to both of those. But another thing is material components. It will list them, and most of the time, you are considered to be able to have those material components. You have an item, which you can purchase, called a spell component pouch. So I purchased a spell component pouch. It says I would have like a sprig of holly, or the dust of a bone that was burnt to ash, something like that. And these things don't have value, normally. It says I don't need those as a sorcerer. Or some of them might have value. Traditionally, that might be more than 1 gold, but if it says, like, value 1 gold piece, and I need this material, I wouldn't need it. Now, there are other things that you can occur with spellcasting. I'll talk about that later, but you just have to think about those 3 things right now, big ones to bring up, and especially to do with this feat. The last thing a sorcerer chooses is a bloodline. What's a bloodline? A bloodline says what source in my ancestry, or for whatever source, whether it's a certain type of creature or a certain type of thing, has given me magic spells. Like a bloodline might be draconic, that would be dragons, or it might be celestial, like angels and stuff. They list a lot of bloodlines in the book, and you choose one and you get things for your bloodline. The kind of things you get are bonus feats. You get some extra bonus feats that are according to your bloodline. Bonus skill that you can take that would be a trained skill. I've talked about skills in the past, how each class has a number of skills that if you take it, you get a +3 trained bonus to. This one gives you an extra one. So if I'm this type of sorcerer, I get this skill that if I choose to take ranks in it, I get the trained bonus. They also give you bonus spells known, that there are these bonus spells you can add to your known list that are dependent on your bloodline. And the last thing bloodlines give are traditionally bloodlines have different powers that you get. Small powers that normally level with you that you get, and they give you whatever bonus it says. So if you're interested in certain bloodlines, read everything it gives you, like the skill, the bonus feats, the bloodline power, the bonus spells. Figure out if you want to take that bloodline. And so the last class I'm going to talk about is the wizard. The wizard is a very quintessential role-playing class. It's kind of like the fighter and the rogue are actually really quintessential. They have been there in some form since the beginning. The wizard is an arcane caster just like the sorcerer, but he learns his spells through study, meticulous study. So intelligence is what's critical to be a wizard. They get 2+ intelligence skills. They have proficiency in a few weapons, like daggers and quarterstaffs. They don't get a lot of proficiency in anything for equipment-wise. They, of course, get goodwill saves, half base attack bonus, and a d6 hit dice, just like a sorcerer. Now, they get spellcasting. Now, their spellcasting is based upon their intelligence, and they have a number of slots per day. They memorize into a slots. Now, where do they memorize from? Wizards have spell books. At least one. Maybe if they fill one up, they get more. What does a spell book have in it? A spell book is a book that has all the cantrips a wizard could know in there. So all the cantrips are in there, and it starts with 3 plus your intelligence modifier first level spells. So if my intelligence is 16, I would have 6 first level spells in here, plus all the cantrips. Then I take my spell slots, and every day I memorize and fill those slots. For my 0 level / cantrip slots, I would choose 4 of all those 0 levels that I would know today. Of the 6 first levels, I would choose 2 if I have 2 first level spell slots. Now it could be the same one twice, it could be 2 different ones, it could be any combination, but I have to choose from my list in my spell book. I'm memorizing from that source. So The spellbook is the most important thing to a wizard. You use it to memorize your spells, and then of course you have your spell slots which you've memorized for the day. But it means they can change their spells daily. Now wizards get a couple other things. They get the free scribe scroll feed. What does that mean? Well, it means they can make a magic item called a scroll. It costs money to do it. It costs half the price it would be to buy the scroll. You can look in the book, it will tell you the price for a type of scroll. The price of scrolls dependent on the level of the spell you're scribing. First level spells are cheaper than 8th level spells. But you spend half the point, you take some time, you scribe it in here, and what it is then a magic item that holds onto one of those spells. Now scrolls are very restrictive. Only someone that has that spell on their spell list can cast it. Meaning if I'm a wizard and I've made this, of course another wizard can cast it. But certain spells that are on the wizard's list might be on the bards, might be on the clerics. They can cast it then. Well, the cleric not so much because he can only cast divine spells and it's arcane. But the bard is a good example. Or there are other arcane classes. But wizards and sorcerers are considered to have the same list, so they're going to both be included in this. So then they can just use this scroll. So you can make scrolls to have extra spells per day. You have to think of it that way, but you're spending money on it. It's a consumable. You're trading money to have more options maybe. Like I have a spell in my spell book that I think might come up rarely, but not very often. So I decide I'm going to scribe that spell into a scroll. So now I can cast it if I really need it, and I can memorize spells, which are more important. Those are strategies. You have to think about those. Or you can ignore the feat completely. You might not need to use it. Now the wizards get two other things. Arcane School and Arcane Bond. Let's talk about the school first. Arcane School is, a wizard's Arcane School is the group of magic they study. There's of course Universalist, which is the general wizard, meaning I have no restrictions on my spells, I just learn all the spells. Every school gives you a number of special abilities beyond the basic school rules. For the Universalist, the school rules don't apply. You just get a number of special abilities for being a Universalist. They're not super great, but they're decent, and you learn them. Specialization means I choose a school of magic, and I specialize it. Now when you look at spells in the player's handbook, all spells have a school, and possibly some sub-schools, which divide them up. An example is Conjuration is a school, or there's Abjuration, Enchantment, Evocation, Necromancy, Transmutation, Illusion. I haven't gone all over all of them. Those are just examples of the schools. When you specialize in one of those schools, you get of course the abilities of that school, but then you have certain rules. You can memorize one extra spell of your school. So if I choose to be a transmuter, which studies transmutation school, I can have one extra transmutation school per level I can memorize. I have an extra bonus slot. The disadvantage of having a school specialization is I have to choose 2 other schools and have them be my bad schools. So I might choose transmutation, but be bad at necromancy, and be bad at enchantment. So if I really want to, and need to memorize one of those spells in one of those schools, it takes 2 slots up to memorize. So I might have a bonus one, but getting one of my forbidden spells, it's hard to memorize it. So it's sort of like you almost don't want to use those at all. Granted, maybe the type of wizard you're going to play isn't ever going to use those. But it's a thing to think about. And the last thing they get is an Arcane Bond. The Arcane Bond comes in 2 forms. The first one is an object. If they choose to bond to an object, it could be like an orb, a staff, a weapon, then with that bond, they're able to cast a spell from their spell book for free as if they memorized it once per day. It just means I get an extra spell from my spell book per day. I am not required to have memorized it earlier. It's a big advantage. So it'd be like, oh, I need this spell. I didn't memorize it. We can't wait 8 hours for me to memorize it again. Bonded item. It gives me that spell. Now, the other advantage of a bonded item is you don't need feats to make it a magic item. Normally, just like the scribe scroll I talked about, there are other feats, because scribe scroll's a feat, that give you the ability to make different types of magic items. You don't need those to make this a magic item. You need the money to, because whenever you make something a magic item, you have to pay half the price and take some time. That's the thing, it costs money and time to make magic items. It's cheaper than buying them, but money and time. The other bond you can take is a familiar. A familiar would be like an owl or a rat or a cat, a bat, a lizard, a toad, some kind of small animal that's by your side. Now the animal gives you a bonus. Whatever animal it is, it gives you a bonus. Now the different animals have different bonuses. There's an entire list of them. The other thing is they have their own stats, and they can do some things that can help you in battle. So familiars have a whole list of abilities that they get as they level, just like you, and they get better and stronger as they level, just like you. So it's a trade-off. My bonded item might give me an extra spell, and I can enchant it, but my familiar gives me a small ability anyway, and might give me some special abilities that might help in combat later. Whatever you want as your character. You can choose what you want to have your bond with. Alright, so now we've gone over all the classes in Pathfinder. We're ready to move on to the next step. So, if you enjoyed this video, please like it. Leave comments if you have any questions or if you want to discuss anything. And please become a citizen, join the Empire. We're always looking for more members. And until next time, I bid you farewell.